Every great invention begins with an idea. Every great company begins with a dream. But every extraordinary life begins with a question. What if the world doesn't have to stay the way it is? That single question changed the life of one quiet boy. And in time, it helped change the future for all of us. You're listening to Vivid English Stories, where true stories help you improve your English while inspiring the way you see the world. Today, this is the story of Elon Musk. June 28th, Pretoria, South Africa. Long before rockets, long before electric cars, long before billions of dollars, there was only a quiet little boy with an unusually curious mind. While other children played outside, Elon often disappeared into books. Science fiction, history, engineering, adventure, anything that made him wonder. What could the future look like? Books became more than entertainment. They became his escape, his classroom, and eventually his greatest source of imagination. Sometimes he became so deeply focused while reading that people thought he couldn't hear them. Doctors even checked his hearing. It was completely normal. The truth was much simpler. When Elon opened a book, the outside world simply disappeared. But life outside those books wasn't always kind. School was difficult. Elon was quiet, different, curious. And children don't always understand someone who is different. Sometimes they make fun of them. Sometimes they do something much worse. Elon was bullied repeatedly. One attack became so violent that he was thrown down a flight of stairs and beaten until he lost consciousness. He was taken to the hospital. His body healed, but some memories take much longer to disappear. Most children would have tried to become like everyone else. Elon didn't. Instead, he returned to the one place where impossible ideas were always welcome: books. Because inside those pages, nobody laughed when someone imagined living on another planet. There's an English word I'd like you to remember: curious. A curious person always wants to learn something new. Curiosity is often the beginning of every great discovery. And Elon Musk was endlessly curious. Life at school was only one challenge. The harder challenge was waiting at home. His parents divorced while he was still young. For a time, Elon chose to live with his father. Years later, he would describe that decision as one of the biggest mistakes of his life. He has spoken publicly about their difficult relationship. His father has disagreed with parts of Elon's account. The full truth belongs to their family. But one thing is beyond debate. Those years left a deep emotional mark. While life at home became more complicated, another world was quietly opening: the world of computers. At just 12 years old, Elon taught himself programming. No private teacher, no expensive course, just books, practice, and countless hours of determination. Soon, he created a simple computer game called Blastar. It wasn't a worldwide success, But it proved something important. Ideas could become reality. And reality could create opportunity. Another English word: persistence. Persistence means continuing, even when progress feels slow. Talent may help you begin. Persistence helps you finish. As Elon grew older, one dream became clearer. He wanted to go to North America. Not because life would be easier, but because he believed the future of technology was being built there. He wasn't chasing comfort. He was chasing possibility. And sometimes, the biggest step toward your future is walking away from everything you've ever known. Sometimes, the hardest journey doesn't begin when you arrive somewhere new. It begins the moment you leave everything familiar behind. For Elon, that moment had arrived. He stepped onto Canadian soil with little money, very few connections, and no guarantee that his dream would ever come true. He wasn't famous. He wasn't successful. He was simply another young immigrant trying to build a better future. Dreams always look beautiful from a distance. Living them is something very different. To support himself, Elon accepted whatever work he could find. He worked on farms. He carried heavy materials. He worked in a lumber mill. Some jobs were exhausting. Some were dangerous. None of them looked like the beginning of an extraordinary life. But every paycheck bought him something more valuable than comfort: time. One more week, one more month, one more chance. Here's another word: opportunity. An opportunity is a chance to create a better future. The interesting thing is, opportunities rarely arrive looking perfect. Sometimes they arrive disguised as hard work. Those difficult months taught Elon lessons that no classroom could offer. How to solve problems, how to stay focused, how to keep moving, even when nobody believed in you. Later, people would admire his success. Very few would remember the jobs that helped build his character. Because history usually celebrates the finish line, not the long road that leads to it. Eventually, Elon enrolled at Queen's University. For the first time, he found himself surrounded by people who loved ideas as much as he did. Books were still his closest friends, but now they were joined by conversations, debates, big questions, and even bigger dreams. Yet deep inside, he knew Canada was not his final destination. There was another place calling him: the United States, the center of a technological revolution that was only beginning. 2 years later, he transferred to the University of Pennsylvania. There, he studied physics and economics. At first, they seemed completely different. One explained how the universe works. The other explained how people make decisions. Years later, those two subjects would quietly shape almost every company he would build. English word vision. Vision is the ability to see possibilities before everyone else does. Most people look at the world as it is. Visionary people look at the world as it could become. And Elon was beginning to see something that millions of others had not yet noticed. In the early 1990s, the internet was still a mystery. There was no YouTube, no Google, no Facebook, no smartphones resting inside people's pockets. For most people, the internet was just another experiment. Something interesting, but not very important. Elon saw something completely different. He believed the internet would become part of everyday life. It would change how people communicate, how they shop, how they learn, how they work, and eventually, how the entire world connects. That belief became impossible to ignore. After graduation, most of his classmates started looking for secure jobs, good salaries, comfortable offices, a predictable future. Elon walked in the opposite direction. He didn't want to build someone else's dream. He wanted to build his own. Together with his brother, Kimball, he started a tiny company called Zip2. The office was small. The budget was even smaller. Money disappeared almost as quickly as they earned it. To save every dollar, Elon often slept inside the office. A sleeping bag became his bed. A nearby gym became his bathroom. Luxury was never part of the plan. Survival was. Every morning, they knocked on doors, meeting business owners, trying to explain why every company would someday need an online presence. Most people didn't believe them. Some smiled politely. Others laughed. One businessman asked, "Why would anyone search for a business on a computer?" It sounded like a reasonable question, because the future hadn't arrived yet. English word, sacrifice. Sacrifice means giving up something today for something greater tomorrow. Behind every remarkable success, there is usually an invisible sacrifice. The audience sees the victory. They rarely see the price. Weeks became months. Months became years. Slowly, customers began to appear. Then, investors. The tiny startup was finally growing. Not because success arrived overnight, but because they refused to quit on difficult days. Then, everything changed. In 1999, computer giant Compaq offered to buy Zip2. The deal was worth around $307 million. For Elon, still only in his 20s, it meant his first real fortune. Most people would have celebrated, taken a vacation, bought a dream house, enjoyed the reward. But Elon did something very few expected. He looked at the money and asked, "What's next?" Not, "How can I keep this?" but, "How can I use this to build something even bigger?" That single question would change the direction of his entire life. Sometimes, success isn't the finish line. Sometimes, it's simply the entrance to a much more dangerous journey. And Elon Musk was about to step through that door. For thousands of years, money changed very little. People carried cash, they wrote checks, they waited, sometimes for days, before a payment arrived. It worked, but it was slow. And Elon believed slow systems would never build a fast future. After selling Zip2, he didn't slow down. He moved faster. Instead of protecting the money he had earned, he invested it almost immediately. His next company was called X.com. Its goal was simple to describe, but incredibly difficult to achieve. Move banking to the internet. Today, that idea sounds normal. You can send money with just a few taps. But in the late 1990s, most people didn't trust online banking. The technology was new, the risks felt real, and convincing people was harder than building the software. Another company, called Confinity, was working on a similar idea. Instead of fighting forever, the two companies merged. From that merger, a new name began to grow: PayPal. Millions of people started using it. Sending money online became faster, safer, easier. A small startup was quietly changing how the world moved money. English word: disrupt. To disrupt means to completely change the way something has always been done. Real innovation doesn't simply improve the old system. Sometimes it replaces it. But success doesn't remove conflict. As PayPal grew, different leaders had different ideas about its future. There were disagreements, difficult decisions, strong opinions. Eventually, while Elon was away on a business trip, the board decided to replace him as CEO. For many people, that moment would have ended everything. Anger, pride, revenge. Those reactions would have been easy. Instead, Elon remained the company's largest shareholder. He continued believing that PayPal could still become something remarkable. Sometimes, leadership isn't about holding the highest title. Sometimes, it's about believing in the mission, even when your position changes. Then, in 2002, another headline appeared. eBay announced it would acquire PayPal. The deal was worth approximately $1.5 billion. When the sale was completed, Elon received more than $100 million after taxes. At only 31 years old, he had achieved what millions of people dream about: financial freedom, complete security, the kind of life where you never need to worry about money again. Imagine someone placing more than $100 million into your account. What would you do? Retire? Travel the world? Buy everything you've ever wanted? Most people would. Elon made a different choice. A choice that shocked friends, confused investors, and made many experts question his judgment. He looked at his fortune not as something to protect, but as something to risk. Almost all of it. Because in his mind, he wasn't asking, how can I become richer? He was asking, what problems are still waiting to be solved? And the answers would lead him into 3 industries where failure seemed almost guaranteed: cars, space, and clean energy. The biggest gamble of his life was about to begin. Some people spend their lives protecting success. Others risk success to build the future. Elon Musk was about to discover which path he truly belonged to. Imagine this. You are 31 years old. Your bank account holds more money than you could spend in several lifetimes. No debt, no financial pressure, no reason to ever work again. For millions of people, that would be the perfect ending. For Elon Musk, it felt like the beginning. Success had given him freedom. Now, he had to decide what to do with it. Protect it or risk it. He chose the second option. Friends couldn't understand. Some investors thought he had lost his mind. Even experienced entrepreneurs warned him, don't put all your money into one dream. Elon smiled. Then he did something even more unbelievable. He didn't invest in one dream. He invested in three. The first was transportation. He believed the future of cars could not depend forever on gasoline. At that time, electric cars were slow, expensive, and unpopular. Many experts believed they would never become mainstream. Elon saw the future differently. He joined Tesla as one of its earliest investors and soon became deeply involved in leading the company. People laughed. An electric sports car? Nobody wants that. It will never compete with companies that have existed for 100 years. Those words became background noise. Elon had heard similar doubts his entire life. The second dream was even more dangerous. Space. In 2002, he founded SpaceX. At the time, private space companies barely existed. Most people believed space exploration belonged to governments. NASA, Russia, large national programs, not startups, not entrepreneurs, certainly not someone who had made his money building internet companies. English word, conviction. Conviction means a belief so strong that criticism cannot easily shake it. Confidence depends on success. Conviction survives failure. When Elon visited Russia, hoping to buy old rockets, the negotiations failed. Some people might have given up. Instead, he returned home and asked a different question. Why are rockets so expensive? He studied, he calculated, he spoke with engineers. Then he reached a conclusion. The raw materials were only a small fraction of the final cost. If rockets could be redesigned and eventually reused, space could become dramatically more affordable. It sounded impossible, but impossible ideas had never frightened him. Then came the third mission, clean energy. He supported Solar City because he believed the future would require more than electric cars. It would require clean electricity too. 3 companies, 3 enormous challenges, 3 industries that many experts considered too difficult for one person to change. From the outside, everything looked exciting. Magazine covers, interviews, big announcements. The world saw a visionary entrepreneur. But behind the headlines, another story was quietly unfolding. A story filled with missed deadlines, financial pressure, and growing uncertainty. The higher Elon climbed, the more dangerous the fall became. And then came the year that almost destroyed everything. 2008. Sometimes life doesn't test your intelligence. It doesn't test your talent. It tests your decision to keep going. For Elon Musk, that test arrived in 2008. From the outside, he looked successful. The founder of companies, a millionaire, a visionary. But behind closed doors, everything was beginning to fall apart. SpaceX had already failed 3 rocket launches. Each explosion destroyed more than hardware. It destroyed confidence. Investors were losing faith. The media called the company a fantasy. Many experts believed the experiment was over. Tesla was facing a different crisis. The company was running out of cash.
Production delays continued. Costs kept rising. Customers were waiting. Investors were becoming nervous. And then the global financial crisis made everything worse. Money that once seemed available suddenly disappeared. Across the world, companies were collapsing. Banks were failing. Fear had replaced confidence. English word, resilience. Resilience is the ability to recover after failure. It isn't pretending that life is easy. It's choosing to stand up one more time. The pressure wasn't only professional. It was deeply personal. His marriage was coming to an end. He was leading multiple companies, sleeping very little, working almost every waking hour. Employees depended on him. Investors questioned him. The media criticized him. And every morning, he woke up knowing that one more failure could end everything. There was no comfortable escape. No hidden fortune waiting somewhere else. Elon had invested most of the money he earned from PayPal back into his companies. If they failed, he failed. There was no backup plan. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff. Behind you is everything you've worked for. In front of you is uncertainty. And somehow, the only way forward is to take one more step. That was 2008. Inside SpaceX, the engineers kept working. Late nights, long weekends, one test after another. No one knew whether their efforts would ever succeed, but they kept going. Because sometimes the difference between failure and history is simply refusing to quit. By the end of the year, SpaceX had enough money for just one more launch. One final attempt. If it failed, the company would almost certainly run out of money. Tesla was standing on the same edge. The future of both companies now depended on something far bigger than luck. Tick, tick, tick. The countdown had already begun. No applause, no headlines, no celebration. Just a rocket standing alone on Omelek Island. For most people, it was another launch. For the people standing there, it was everything. This rocket was called Falcon 1. 3 times before, it had tried to reach orbit. 3 times, it had failed. There would be no 5th attempt. If this mission failed, SpaceX would almost certainly be finished. Inside the control room, no one wasted words. Engineers stared at their screens. Every number mattered. Every signal mattered. Every second mattered. Years of work had been reduced to one final countdown. 10, 9, 8. No dramatic music, only breathing, only concentration, only hope. 7, 6, 5. Every person in that room remembered the previous failures. They knew exactly how quickly hope could disappear. 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. A brilliant column of fire pushed the rocket toward the sky. Slowly, it lifted from the ground. No one celebrated. Not yet. They had celebrated too early before. This time, they waited. The rocket climbed higher. Its first stage performed exactly as planned. Stage separation. Successful. The second stage engine ignited. Successful. The numbers continued to look good. 1 minute, then 2, then 5. The silence inside the control room grew even louder. Then, a calm voice broke the silence. Falcon 1 has reached orbit. For just a moment, nobody moved. Almost as if their minds needed time to believe what their eyes were already seeing. Then, the room exploded with emotion. People hugged. People laughed. Some wiped away tears. Not because they had built a rocket, but because they had refused to surrender after 3 painful failures. That single success changed everything. A few months later, NASA awarded SpaceX a contract worth approximately $1.6 billion to deliver cargo to the International Space Station. It wasn't simply a business deal. It was trust. Trust earned through persistence. Tesla also survived. New investment arrived just in time. The company that many believed would disappear was given another chance. Another chance. English word breakthrough. A breakthrough is an important success that happens after repeated failure. People usually remember the breakthrough. They often forget the years of struggle that made it possible. Looking back, it's easy to believe success was inevitable. It wasn't. There were moments when the future balanced on a single decision, a single launch, a single opportunity. If Falcon 1 had failed again, the story you are listening to today might have ended very differently. But history is sometimes changed by people who decide to try one more time. The hardest battle was finally over. But Elon Musk wasn't thinking about celebrating. He was already asking his next question. Now, how do we build the future? The 4th launch saved SpaceX. Tesla had survived. For many people, that would have been enough. 2 companies, global recognition, financial success, a place in history. Most people would finally slow down. Elon Musk did the opposite. He once said that he wasn't interested in building companies just to build companies.
Each one had to solve a problem that mattered. Tesla was never only about making cars. It was about asking a difficult question. What happens if the world keeps depending on fossil fuels forever? Electric vehicles were his answer. Not the only answer, but one answer he believed could make a difference. SpaceX was never only about launching rockets. The bigger goal was making access to space far less expensive. Because if reaching space always costs an enormous fortune, then very few people will ever explore it. Elon believed that if rockets could be reused, space travel could eventually become far more accessible. At first, many experts dismissed the idea. Then, people watched a rocket booster return to Earth and land upright. What once looked like science fiction became engineering. English word purpose. Purpose is the reason behind what you do. A goal can be achieved. A purpose keeps calling you toward the next challenge. As new projects appeared, many people wondered why Elon kept taking such enormous risks. Why not simply enjoy success? Perhaps the answer was hidden in the little boy who spent hours reading books about impossible futures. Some people grow older and stop asking questions. He never did. Over time, his work expanded beyond cars and rockets. Projects like Starlink aimed to provide internet access to places where reliable connections had never existed. Other ventures explored clean energy, artificial intelligence, and brain-computer technology. Some ideas received praise. Others sparked serious debate. Not everyone agreed with his decisions, and not everyone believed his vision was the right one. That remains part of his story. But whether people admired him or criticized him, very few could ignore him. Because once again, he was asking questions that most people weren't even thinking about yet. From the outside, people saw rockets, cars, satellites, technology. But underneath, there was one idea connecting them all. A belief that the future doesn't simply arrive on its own. Someone has to build it. And somewhere inside that belief, the quiet little boy who once disappeared inside library books was still there. Only now, his imagination was no longer limited to the pages of a story. It had become part of the real world. Close your eyes for just a moment. Imagine a quiet little boy sitting alone with a book. No one knows his name. No one believes he will change anything. To the world, he is just another child. But inside his mind, questions are growing. Questions that most people never think to ask. Years later, that same boy would help reshape the electric car industry, challenge the economics of spaceflight, build companies that millions of people use, and become one of the wealthiest people in modern history. But if you look closely, those achievements are not really where the story begins, nor are they where it ends. Because this story has never been only about Elon Musk. It's about an idea. The idea that the future is not something we patiently wait for. It's something people choose to build.
Elon word legacy. A legacy isn't simply what you leave behind. It's the impact your actions continue to have long after the moment has passed. Money can be earned, lost, earned again. Fame can rise and disappear. But ideas can outlive the people who first imagined them. Elon Musk remains one of the most discussed figures in the world. Some people see him as one of the greatest innovators of his generation. Others strongly disagree with some of his decisions, his leadership, or his public statements. Both views exist, and both are part of his story. History will continue to debate his legacy. But there is one lesson few people question. Progress almost always begins with someone willing to challenge what everyone else accepts. Sometimes those people succeed. Sometimes they fail. But without them, the future moves much more slowly. Somewhere tonight, a student is opening a book. Somewhere, someone is writing their very first line of code. Somewhere, another child is asking a question that everyone else ignores. No headline will appear tomorrow. No cameras will be waiting. Because history rarely announces its next dreamer. It simply waits for someone curious enough to begin. Maybe that's why stories like this matter. Not because they tell us who to become, but because they remind us that extraordinary journeys often begin with ordinary questions. Questions like, what if? Why not? Can this be done differently? The little boy who once escaped into books never stopped turning the page. And perhaps that's the simplest way to understand his entire journey. He kept turning the page long after everyone else thought the story was over. Thank you for listening. This has been Vivid English Stories, where every true story helps you improve your English while inspiring the way you see the world. Until our next story, keep learning, keep asking questions, and never lose your curiosity.